What's going on, my damn advisors? I'm super excited to be here today with industry thought leader, a brilliant marketer, and a phenomenal human being, Kristen Luke. Kristen has been featured on Michael Kitces' podcast, Matt Holleran's podcast, Dr. Travis Perry, Advisor Perspective, and probably more numerous accolades than I could share with you all today. Kristen has authored a book called Uncomparable. And today we're going to help you advisors that are listening in figure out how you can become uncomparable using a niche and how you can stand out in a sea of sameness. Let me just share a little bit about Kristen Luke, our guest today. Kristen is the founder of Cultivate Creative Studio. She's a seasoned advisor, niche marketing consultant, and author of Uncomparable, as I outlined. She has over 15 years of experience in the advisor space, and she specializes in working with RIAs and independent advisors to help them break free from uniformity that plagues our industry. That is marketing speak for she helps us all not be boring and stand out in the crowd and help us uniquely serve our clients. Kristen, welcome to the Damn Live podcast, my friend.
Thanks, Eric. I'm really excited to be here. I love the conversations we've had offline, so I'm looking forward to it today.
Beautiful. So let's just start off with how the heck did you get into this financial advisory industry, right? And then as you got into it, what were some of your revelations that you had about it?
Yeah, so I fell into this. It was not planned. My background, I was marketing. I was in graduate school with getting an MBA with an emphasis in marketing. And the first job I got out of graduate school just happened to be working for an RIA in San Diego. And spent 3 years there. I had no experience in financial services. I didn't know what I was doing as far as the content and that kind of thing. I knew about marketing, but I didn't know about all of the aspects that go into financial services. But after 3 years, I decided to go start my own business, and I opened what is now Cultivate Creative Studio. It's had some iterations. And so that's been 15 years now of working with financial advisors. And what I've really learned about this industry is the marketing is really interesting to me because it's about two things. It's about relationships and it's about education. You're not trying to sell a candle or some sort of consumer product. You get to sell advice and expertise. And I really enjoy that versus trying to push some sort of product on people, which is also why I work with RAs and not necessarily commission-based advisors.
I love it. So what was your experience with marketing in the early days? What were you doing to help this firm out of San Diego bring clients in? Because I am positive that advisors out there have heard all sorts of different tactics to try to bring in clients. So what were you doing back then? And then we're going to kind of dive into more about niching and how that's maybe a better approach.
Right. It was very traditional financial advisor marketing. This was back in about 2005 to 2008. So it was pre-social media, a little bit of email marketing, website, but really what we were doing was workshops at like the Denny's, right? Twice a week, sending out direct mail and at Sizzler, all of that with we call them the plate lickers, people who just come for a free meal and listen in. And then eventually they become clients. We also did a radio show as well. So very traditional types of marketing where it requires a big budget to be able to really pull that off because you're paying for direct mail, you're paying for the radio show, you're paying for those meals. And so it was a real good lesson on how advisors were marketing at that time. Now, in 2008, when I started my business, like social media started coming into the play, and everything has changed since then. There's still workshops and radio shows out there, but the possible options are so much greater now than they've ever been for advisors.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So as you sit here today, what do you think is the number one issue, or what are a few issues that are plaguing most advisors marketing? Like, what is the issue that you've seen as a marketer in your practice and working? What's the number one issue or a handful of issues that you see?
I think the hardest thing is just to break out from the noise. And every year it seems to get harder. I've seen advisors do really well with marketing when there's some sort of disruption in marketing. So social media was like a new option for them. And advisors who got into that did really well. We know some of them now, like Josh Brown, right? And Michael Kitces, and they all took advantage of that very early on. Well, as it becomes more popular, other advisors get on, and it's harder to stand out in the crowd because there's just more people. It happened with search engine optimization. It's happening with Google reviews. And so unless you are an early adopter of some of these things that come out, you're just going to blend in with everybody else, when you adopt it a few years later. And so you got to figure out a way to stand out from all that noise. And we especially saw that starting in 2020. A lot of advisors weren't doing a lot of digital marketing, but then when they didn't have a choice, everyone went in, right? Everyone's going into social media, everyone's doing SEO. And so how do you stand out? And that was when I had the realization, people need to find a way to stand out. And you can do it lots of different ways, right? You can be super entertaining, you can be controversial, but that doesn't really work with most advisors. And so the way that I think it fits best with their personality is saying, hey, I'm going to be a specialist in this niche. I'm going to be the best person for this particular type of client. And that's how I'm going to stand out. And you said I was going to help people become not boring. That is actually not the case. I don't care if you're boring.
Please, but be less boring. Your clients want you at least be interested, okay?
Well, I think people just, as long as you're talking about what's interesting to them, even if you're boring, but you're telling them things that are just really resonating with them, they're going to be interested.
Okay. All right. So when you think about this concept, what you're saying is that in 2020, things crystallized for you. You're already seeing, I'm sure, trends of people that were becoming successful going after niches. But in 2020, what does it say? When you don't have any other choice, you only got one direction to go. I'm trying to think about the proper word phraseology for this, but folks had no choice except to stand out. And the folks that were doing it well, were there advisors that you saw that were kind of your case studies that you thought about, like, oh, I have these 10 clients, I'm just using an example, and 3 of them are doing exceptionally well. Why are these 3 doing better than the 10? And then you kind of did the data validate your thesis?
Yeah, I had clients that were focused on a niche, and I've always focused on a niche. I started working with advisors when I started my business, so that's always been my natural tendency for marketing. And also, the other thing I like about niche marketing is it's very much about content and education, and I enjoy that type of marketing versus direct mail or ads or that type of thing. So I did have some clients that were doing niche marketing, and I noticed that they really didn't have a problem with this shift in 2020, and they just kept doing the same marketing they were doing because they were already integrated into this niche community. Some of it was online, but some of it was not, I'll have to say. But it didn't seem like anything changed in their marketing plan because they already had a strategy. They were already connecting with this niche in different channels, and they had already established this expertise. And so when people were looking for an advisor, they came directly to those niche advisors. And so that was really kind of the breaking point. I'm like, I only want to work with advisors who are going to niche going forward. So I still have clients that are more generalist, but it's just, you have to do a lot of client events and networking, and it's just a different type of marketing that I think is actually a lot more difficult to do than niche marketing.
So let's talk about some examples of
Mhm.
niches, right? And then we'll debunk some
Okay.
things that folks think are niches that are not. But define what is a niche, and then give me a few examples of niches in our industry that you think that folks are doing really well.
So a niche to me is a group of people who have similar attributes and share similar characteristics, but they also share one similar problem. And I think that's where people make the mistake about what a niche is. right? And so business owners is not a niche, because are we talking about startups? Are we talking about micro business owners? Are we talking about people who are exiting the business? They all have completely different problems. So business owners is not a niche. Exit planning for business owners is a niche, though I would argue that you should narrow it down even more to be more impactful. Golfers, also not a niche. That's just a place where you go and network with people.
I look at like that might be a sub characteristic of what your clients or niche might like. They might like to golf.
Right. I know. I think of it as just like, instead of going to the Rotary Club, you go to the golf course, but you're still networking with people. So not a niche. In my book, I talk about one advisor who was focused on special needs planning, but specifically around mental health disorders. And the problem that the parents have in that case is that they have to plan for their own retirement, and then they have to plan for the life of their child as well. And so you're financing 2 lifetimes in order to be able to help your child. And so that is a critical problem that needs to be solved. And they all go to the same communities, they're in the same organizations, they're in the same support groups. And this particular advisor wrote a book, and some of the doctors of the support groups or counselors actually recommend the book, and they talk about it in their support groups. And so that's a really good example of what a niche really is when you become not only an expert, but you become a part of that community.
I mean, I think that what you said, that was phenomenal. I think there's so many advisors now that if they start working a niche or they identify a niche, they don't know how to become an expert in that space. And you just shared something that was completely low tech. So for some of you out there that are listening to this, Kristen said the person wrote a book and then got into a community, and then the community liked the book and it was a resource and gave it away to folks within the community. That has nothing to do with technology. That has nothing to do with social media. That has to do with showing up. So I love that, because I think so much of what happens right now in marketing is we all get, I'm sure you hear this, but I hear this all the time from different advisors. I'm just going to run Google ads or Facebook ads, or I'm just going to do. And what you just described was a strategy that didn't encompass any of that. It had to do with a person that was dealing with the problem, identified a problem, wrote some thoughts down on how to address and solve the problem, and some things for these folks that were dealing with pain points for their family and their special needs child. And it became a valuable resource. So the person now had folks actively wanting to engage them versus trying to sell somebody.
Right, exactly. And he didn't do any online marketing. He would go to some association events. He bought a booth in the beginning just to get known. And then from there, he got speaking engagements. And not once has he done any sort of online marketing with that.
I love that. So let's talk about some additional things that are not niches. Mm-hmm. This one makes me laugh. Are women a niche?
Not when they're 51% of the population. Again, they don't share a problem. Widows is a niche, divorcees is a niche, but women are not a niche.
Okay. The thing is, I go to so many advisors' websites, and it's like, we work with executives, retirees, women, and I'm like, okay. So women are just a broad category. I couldn't agree with you more. So women, it needs to be identified to some common thing, whether it's widowhood, caring for aging parents, mm-hmm. divorce, there's multitude of other things, women executives, women business owners with specified things involved. What other common? What'd you say? Single women?
Even single women who have to, they only have one income preparing for their retirement, and then they're going to be responsible for their well-being and as they age. So yeah, I mean, that's a problem too, but not women.
What about pre-retirees? This is one I hear all the time, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, again, not a niche. Everyone is a pre-retiree unless you're like in the top 1%. So when I hear that, and I still hear that quite a bit, I try to get them to narrow in on an industry or a type of profession or, something on equity compensation. There has to be something more narrow than pre-retirees. It's just too broad. And everyone's going after that, and there's no way to stand out.
Yeah, I think some of the advisors I've seen done it well are like I work with executives and professionals at these types of companies or this
Mhm.
specific company or like even in our own practice, we work with people that are 50 plus that are recent empty nesters because they're trying
Mhm.
they're trying to catch up on retirement because they finally got the kids off the payroll and they're like, I got 10 or 15 years to get it right.
Right. I think it can be challenging too if you're too broad of trying to figure out where you're going to market to those people. So empty nesters is interesting. I think that can be, I agree that that is a niche because they have a very specific problem. But then you think, well, where do these people congregate together? And that's always what I'm thinking about a niche too. If I can't figure out where these people are, then it's not going to be a great market.
Yeah, I think so. So the first thing you do is how do you identify a niche? Because this is probably a good segue so we can break into it because you started with part of the problem, which is how do I actually target the niche? But how do how do you identify a niche? And then once you identify it, how do you kind of build your strategy to start cultivating it?
Mhm. So when I work with advisors, I have them do this exercise where they brainstorm, what they're passionate about. And it can be their personal life or in their professional life. They have them brainstorm what capabilities they have and what makes them unique. Like, are there certain things that they have in their past? Is there certain areas of financial planning or investments that they like? And then I have them brainstorm like of the clients that you currently work with, which ones are actually profitable and willing to pay your fees. And that doesn't necessarily have to be just AUM. It could be flat fee. It could be different options. And so if you can find an intersection between those three things, then you have some good options for a niche. And sometimes people will see two or three. And then from there, I have them evaluate, okay, of these that you've chosen or that you've brainstormed, are they actually a good niche? And there's two parts to that. The first part is it a viable niche all on its own? And then are you a good fit for that niche? And viability, like one of the things I think about is, does this niche have a pain point? People come to me and say, oh, they have more money than they know what to do with, and they just need to get their money organized. I'm like, that's going to be real tough because they don't have a pain point and they're not
Yeah,
really going to go out of their way to
there's
fix it.
no there's no urgency. Like I
Mhm.
got to solve this because yeah, I would agree with that. Okay, so no pain point. Go ahead.
No pain point, and urgency is the other one, you just named it. So, like, to me, if you can find one that has pain and urgency, that's gonna be a really good niche. Now, does that mean that that's if they don't have that, that you have to disqualify it? No, but it's just gonna be a harder, longer sales process, and you have to be prepared for that. Um, and again, I look at things like, are they gonna pay your fees? Which actually is a big one. That comes across a lot. People go down this path picking a niche and then realizing that they don't have the money to actually pay your fees or they don't want to. And so that's
I'll
really
tell
important
you
to think.
along that lines, right? The one I see that it breaks my heart, but it is the situation as I see it. Some advisors have created a niche going after teachers, and then they try to create their fee structure, and you're trying to get a set of fees from folks that don't have the disposable income. So that comes down to like viability
Mhm,
of your niche. And if and you could essentially have a niche that has a lower price point, but you've got to decide, what type of practice do you want? Are you going to run a high volume practice
mhm.
and you're going to have limited scale of services, etc. So I think that was a very good point. So identifying the pain point, a sense of urgency, and then you mentioned fit. How do you know if you are a good fit? So some of you and listen, getting ready to listen to this, pay attention. This is the mirror test.
Main things is like, do you have access to this niche? Right? If you don't have any ability to access this niche, it's going to be very difficult. So, an example I like to give is that I talked to an advisor one time and swear he was picking niches out of a hat because he came up with airline pilots. And I said, okay, well, have you ever worked for the airlines? No. Do you have any connection to the airlines? No. Do you have any clients that work for the airline? No. Okay. And I just said, no, that's not a good niche for you. I don't even know how you would begin to get into it, because that's not necessarily an easy group to get a hold of. They're traveling all the time, and I don't, maybe online, but it was just such an uphill battle. It wasn't worth it. And so you want to make sure that you are already integrated into that niche in some way. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be in that niche. Like when I started my business, I wasn't a financial advisor at any point, but I had worked for a financial advisor and I felt comfortable going to those events. They accepted me because I had been an employee of a firm. And so I had that access, even though I wasn't a part of the niche itself. And so, really, that's a big piece of it. And if you can be a part of that niche, even better, because you have an in immediately. And the advisor I talked about who wrote the book about special needs planning, he has a son that has mental health issue that's going to be a problem for the rest of his life. And so it's easy for him to go to these support groups and get involved because he is a part of that community just naturally.
I think you brought a really good point, like something that I think you said that without saying was, if you have an understanding of the niche, you can speak the language, and
Hmm.
understanding the language is powerful, right? And in your example, having worked, in a financial advisory firm, you knew what financial advisors talked about, you knew the issues, et cetera. So it's easy for you to market, just like this advisor example you gave who had a special needs son that was dealing with some mental health issues. He could speak the language in this room. And, advisors out there, uh, when you're thinking about this right now, don't just pick something because you think it's lucrative. Yes, that could be a factor, right? Meaning that these folks can afford to pay your fee, like Kristen said, but pick something that you actually have connections to in some way, shape, or form. Because if you don't, people will figure it out very quickly that you don't know what you're talking about. So please don't fake it till you make it. Make sure that you have an understanding, you have a connection before you pick a niche. Okay, so now we've identified what a niche is. We've talked about, how do you determine the viability. So once I've sat there and I have a niche, I figured out what it is. How do I craft a strategy to cultivate it and to position myself as the person or the guy or the gal for that particular niche, either in
Hmm.
my area or because of COVID and the internet flattening the world in, wherever somebody is.
Yeah, it's actually fairly easy. But before you even start your strategy, you should really get a strong message in place of saying you should be able to communicate who you help, how you help them, and what the outcome is, and do that all within one sentence. And if you can't do that, then you have too convoluted of a message. And so you need to make sure that your message is resonating with your niche on your website and everywhere else. So get that in place first. From there, it's really easy. Just think about like where your community is, right? And just brainstorming. Where are they online? Where are they offline? Who do they look to for information and influence? And then what media are they consuming as well? And if you just brainstorm that, then from there you can start crafting a strategy, right? Like everyone goes right to social media. And I'm like, well, is your market on social media? Because it's not going to do you any good. Um,
That's a fact.
Yeah. So it's really, I think advisors make it too difficult. They often will talk to me and say, well, I want to do radio commercials or I want to do, um, I don't know, SEO. And I'm like, well, is that how people are going to find you? Is that how you're going to integrate into the community? Probably not. SEO maybe, but radio ads, absolutely not. So just thinking about where they are, it doesn't have to be that complicated. And then once you've identified that, then go figure out how to be a part of that. If there's magazines that people are reading, how do you contribute articles to that magazine? If there's events that they're going to, go to those events. If there are Facebook groups that they're a part of, join that Facebook group. It's pretty simple as far as like the channel part. And then the other piece of it is content. So how are you going to position yourself as an expert And you can choose video, you can choose writing. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways you can create content now. But the important thing is that you're always hitting on topics that are of pain to your niche and always speaking directly to them. Again, it's simple, talk about their problems and how and the solutions for those problems. And if you do those two things, you just integrate in the community and write content they're interested in or do videos they're interested in, you're going to get pretty far. It's not really a huge mystery on how to market to these niches.
So, you mentioned something, which is having a good one liner or two sentences for like how you help folks. Can you give me an example or two of good one liners that you've seen?
Oh man, you're putting me on the spot.
Or if you can think of one. I mean,
I'm just
even
gonna make up one. Let's just make
yeah,
up one.
let's make one up. Okay, this is even better. I like acapella.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So something like for daughters who are caregivers of their parents, right?
Hmm.
We help them manage the finances of their parents so that they can go on with their day-to-day lives or
Love that.
something like that. I have a writer who makes it sound beautiful. I just do the big ideas and then she fixes it. But that's kind of the idea. Like, hey, we just help the daughter caregivers manage their family so that you can have your own life too.
Yeah, I love that. So one sentence around messaging, so it brings clarity to what you do. Um, One, figuring out where your niche lives, right?
Mhm.
And advisors listening in, does your niche live on Instagram? Does your niche live on Facebook? Does your niche live on YouTube? Do they live on LinkedIn? Are they on Twitter? Are they on Threads? Are they on Pinterest? Right? My God, there's so many. Please, if you are listening in, you do not need to be on every platform. Okay?
So true.
If you have business owner clients, I can assure you they're not on every single platform. There may be one or two that they are predominantly on, if that are all.
Mm.
Okay. So and I'm using business owners as an example, but there are so many, like I think folks pick the wrong nuances of where to target their potential clients, and they just saturate everything. They're like, I need to be on everything, so they overwhelm. So
I
message
completely agree.
message um how are we going to reach the audience? Okay, so once we identify our message, where our audience lives, how do we then craft a very, like I call it, bullet point, strategy for how we're going to execute becoming the person?
Yeah, I actually talk about this in my book about having like a 13-week plan. I'll be honest, I don't really use it as much as
Yeah.
I've seen advisors. I find with advisors, it's easier to give them kind of a daily, like a plan that they can just repeat. So, like, what are you going to do on a daily basis? What are you going to do on a weekly basis? What are you going to do on a monthly basis? And then what are you going to do as like quarterly initiatives? And so, daily, let's just say that they're on. I worked with an advisor who worked with real estate agents. And so he spent a lot of time on Instagram, which makes sense because that's how they promote their business, right? It's very visual.
Yep.
And so that's a good platform for him. So maybe for him, it would be, going on to Instagram every day and just commenting and responding to people. And then, weekly, maybe he posts a story or whatever they're calling them, reels, right? And then weekly or monthly, he's putting in a article for a real estate publication. So like you can just start kind of saying, what is it that I'm going to do on a daily, weekly, monthly, and then quarterly, which are like your big projects. So like if you wanted to redo your website, you would put that as a quarterly initiative. I think what people get caught up on with marketing is that they always have to be doing something new and keep developing. And really, it's about consistency and just doing the same thing over and over and over again. And if you don't believe me, like if you look at Geico commercials for 20 some years, right, they've been saying, spend 15 minutes, save 15%, right? It's just so repetitive, but that's what makes marketing good. And so if you're going to do, live or reels or things like that, just keep doing them and do them consistently and often. You don't, like you said, you don't have to do every platform. In fact, you're better off just picking one, mastering it, and then thinking about another one. And so it's really, marketing, I think, becomes really good when it's routine and boring for you. And that's when it starts working.
I mean, I think you just hit it nail on the head. Listen, folks, consistency is the superpower that will make you successful in life, especially in marketing. If anybody out there is listening and you have kids, nieces, nephews, everybody knows you got to repeat stuff. And I think, one of the mistakes that advisors make, that you kind of alluded to specifically as you were talking about this example with your client that was trying to go after real estate agents on Instagram, is two things. One, we as advisors think that if we said the message once or twice or maybe three times, that's enough. Here's the reality. We are all competing against noise. And the noise we're competing against is not other advisors. We're competing with Netflix. We're competing with Amazon. We're competing for intention. And the reality is we need to say the message over and over and over and over and over and over again. And maybe on the 10th, the 20th, 30th, the 40th, the 50th time,
100.
somebody's probably going to take action, right? They're finally going to be at a moment, or what they've done is they've indexed you as that person in their mind. And so Kristen was sharing earlier that the most important thing about niching is the pain point and the client's sense of urgency to address the pain within their niche. And so if you've now repetitively built yourself into a place of somebody's mind, and then they're now in pain, they're now going to associate you as the person potentially to solve that issue. So I think what you just said is a golden nugget for anybody listening. Consistency is key here.
I have a funny story. It's not about marketing necessarily, but it's about people not paying attention to your message. I was on an XY planning Facebook group, and someone had posted that their client was surprised to find out that they were moving from TD Ameritrade to Schwab, even though the advisor had sent out communications consistently for a year. And the client still had no idea that they were going from TD Ameritrade to Schwab. It's because they're just not paying attention. That was a client. So you can only imagine prospects are paying even less attention.
Yeah, people, please, guys, repeat yourself. People are busy. They're distracted. They're not necessarily paying attention. So we've identified the niche. We've talked about some of the key attributes, and this marketing plan you're talking about is more of a plan of consistent action of what are the things I need to be doing to move me towards engaging my audience. And then what other key points do you think advisors need to consider as they're kind of thinking out, let's call it a year, 3 years, and so forth with their marketing?
They also really need to think about how they're going to nurture their network of people. And so, kind of at the most basic level is having a newsletter that you're sending out to people that are in your niche. So that means you have to collect their information, and then you need to create content that is consistently going out. So sending out a quarterly newsletter about the market and what's happened is not a good way to nurture anybody. And so that is really something that to think about. And it doesn't just have to be email marketing, though. I like email marketing because it's like the one platform where you own those people, right? You own those email addresses. Sure, they might unsubscribe, but as long as they're subscribed, you control what they see. You control when they get it. Maybe they don't open it, but you're able to send it. But so that's one nurturing channel. Another one, though, is social media, right? So people are just, if they're on social media a lot, if you're posting content and commenting and just engaging, they will see you that way. I would say they'll be careful with social media because you don't own anything, right? Like there can be an algorithm change, and all of a sudden people aren't seeing your content anymore. And if we look at like what happened with Twitter, right? Elon Musk changed the entire platform. And so if you were depending on that for business, things have changed significantly. So I think social media can be a good nurturing channel, but you just got to be very careful that you're not completely relying on that and that you are building a database that you own separately from that.
So you 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 bring up nurturing, right? What
Mhm.
I think that I can speak from personal experience. So those of you that are listening, I am also an advisor. So as much as you all are learning, I'm learning as I'm sitting here having a conversation with Kristen. When you talk about nurturing, what what does that look like from your perspective? Like, what does nurturing look like? How frequently should you do it? What different approaches should be entailed, etc. Because I find, like, new advisors who start out, especially if you're newer, you get a prospect, and either you talk to them or you don't, or you get somebody who's interested, and then, like, you reach out, and you're like, how do you stay in front of them?
Mhm. There's so many different ways that you can do it. At the very basic level, I always say at least have a newsletter and a very minimum send it out monthly. Consistency and repetition and volume are actually going to help move you forward faster. And so, like, if you're doing something weekly or every time you're putting out content, that would actually be better than monthly. I know a lot of advisors feel like they're spamming at that point, but there's just so much noise that it's not really spamming anymore, right? It's like the only way to be heard and seen. And so, like, for me personally, I send out something once a week, and I feel like that's a good rhythm. I happen to be on a list where I get something every day from different organizations. So there's not really a right or wrong, but just know that if people see your name more, they're going to remember it more. But you also don't want them to unsubscribe. So you got to find that balance. You also can just have like ticklers where in your system where it's like, I need to reach out to this person again, especially if they've already gone through your sales process. And I know it's uncomfortable to reach out to people who've been ignoring you for months, but you never know when they're going to be ready to move forward. And there are systems out there that can help automate that. I know one that's popular is Levitate, and it kind of systematizes it for you and you can schedule it. And so that's another good way. Again, if you're connected with them on social media, commenting on what they're posting and just engaging with them, that's another way. The one-on-one can be more time consuming and more difficult to consistently do, but it ends up being more impactful than just a mass um, email blast or mass social media post. But if you can find kind of a combination between the two, that's going to be your best bet.
All right, I got to ask this. This has been sitting here for some time.
Hmm.
Canned content.
Hmm.
Should we
Yeah.
put it back in the can, or should it be uncanned, or should it be uncanned like I see across the board? What do you think about canned content for financial advisors and their and their potential niches?
Okay. I actually think there is a place for it.
Okay.
I'm just going to say that. I know everyone's hates on it. For your niche, you should absolutely not be using canned content. It's too generic. If you want to use that for some sort of base to start writing an article, then you can do that. But I'll be honest, this day and age, like Chat GPT is going to do better than the canned content. And you can ask it to create content for your niche. And so you're going to be better off just doing AI based content than canned content. That being said, for advisors who have a large client base, but they want to move towards a niche, but they still want to have touch points with their clients, but that's not going to be their future. I say use that canned content just to maintain those touch points for those clients. That's fine because you really need to be putting all your focus on your niche. And so if you can take away time that you'd be spending creating content, you don't want to take time away from your niche to create original content for those other clients.
Got it.
So I'm not hating on canned content completely, but it's not an effective marketing
You're
strategy
saying
or
there's
use.
a time and a place. What do
Right.
you,
If you just need some time saving just to maintain some relationships, go for it. But if you want it to be effective, it's not going to be.
so how long does it take? So how long does it take to become,
Uncomparable.
entrenched, or the person uncomparable in your niche? how long does it take from start to finish? Because I know folks are sitting here, they're listening to this now, and they're thinking to themselves, okay, I need to get traction ASAP, right? And
Mhm.
so what's the time frame before somebody becomes uncomparable in their niche?
So it's going to range for people depending on how entrenched they are in their niche to begin with. So I worked with a firm that had a former firefighter, and he was already entrenched in that whole community, right? And so to be able to become uncomparable in that case is a lot less time than if somebody who has no experience with a niche or very little. If anyone has ever started their business, they know that it does take 3 years to really get traction. And I wish I had a magic bullet to say, no, this is going to be faster. It's just, it takes time for people to get to know you and trust you. And you can't really speed that up.
So three years is the magic number approximately, you said?
Approximately, you'll hear other experts in this industry say the same thing. That has been my personal experience. And when I interviewed advisors in the book, they all said about 3 years as well. So maybe 2 to 4, but 3 isn't the average.
Yep. I'll I'll tell you, there are some cheat codes here. So
Oh yeah, I can share. Let's
you
share.
can do it. You can do it. The thing about it is if you depending on your market. So let's break down a live niche here, right?
Okay.
This will be for me.
Okay.
So I do a lot of work in exit planning,
Hmm.
specifically owners that are 3 to 5 years away from some sort of exit, whether it's a succession or whether it's an outright sale. Typically it tends to be with dentists, veterinarians, um, are primarily the two markets. What I've seen with those folks that works is social media does not work. Okay, anybody listening out there, if you're going after business owner clients, for me, like social media has not worked. It's their CPAs, their
Yeah.
business attorneys, their other professionals have been my way into that particular market and then networking with those folks. What I have done to speed up the process is has built targeted content pieces that I can give to those professionals that they could share with their clients long before they ever even think about exiting to get them ready. What other marketing tactics do you think, somebody should employ, let's say if somebody was going after business owners or exit planning?
Yeah. I actually think that exit planning is the hardest one that I've seen
Okay,
because
give it to me. Let's break it down.
this is going to be really tough. Um, I think that business owners are really busy. They're not spending a lot of time on social media. They tend to be in small, close knit groups. So like Vistage or Strategic Coach or things like that, right? And if you're not, well, most advisors that I work with are business owners, but if you're not a business owner, you can't necessarily join those groups, right? And even then, it might be a group of 12 people. It's really small amount of people you're getting in front of if you're joining those groups, unless you can somehow get on like the speaking circuit, and that's all very difficult to do. All of those things. Um, I always try to narrow it down to more specific industries in that case. So you talked about vets, right? Like I'm sure they must have conferences, continuing education, things that they have to go to. In which case, you could buy your way into that with, doing trade show. Also, like a vet, you could probably just show up and give them information because they have, frontage places of work, which a lot of places don't, right? This is not business owners, but I had an advisor I worked with, and now he's a close friend of mine, and he worked with utility employees, and he would just go get an In-N-Out truck and park it across the street and say, "You get a free In-N-Out burger if you just give me your name and email address and address." And so he just like built it up that way, and then just kept drinking on them.
And
You
that's
know?
that's I'm gonna be honest, that's ingenious. Somebody out there, if you if you're trying to target a company, you reach out to HR, whoever's running it, and tell them that you're going to be providing a truck for folks to come down there. Okay, you're going to build up your email list and prospects right then and there. Okay, now, that's fantastic. That has to be one of the best ones I've heard in a long time.
Yeah, it worked really well for him. So you just have to be creative in how you're going to get there. So like vets, I would probably go door to door, almost like pharmaceutical salespeople do, or used to do at least. Otherwise, yeah, just figure out where they are. But I think exit planning is a very difficult one. But I'm glad that you've seen success there because it's challenging.
Yeah, I find that that folks, that anybody that's listening that's going after business owners, and this could apply to a multitude of people. What is the one thing that everybody hates? Taxes. So if you're a financial advisor and you're out there, whatever your niche is, one way that I have found that you can increase the motivation and level of urgency to somebody is to take your niche, and if there's some sort of tax issues or ramifications that the person's unaware of, that is an instant way that you can add value. Right? I think that's where a lot of advisors get it wrong. We were talking about exit planning. One of the ways that we get in the door is because we start with taxes. We start talking about tax issues and tax planning that needs to happen long before. We start giving examples of like the difference of what it can be, and you start showing the cost of indecision, right? That's one of the biggest issues with business owners is they're so busy, right? Let's just say bulls are running forward and bears are running away. Most business owners are ostriches. Their head is down in their business doing their thing, and they don't have time to even think about their personal planning because most of the time they're looking forward. I've got payroll, I've got this, I've got people issues. So I would agree with you. It's one of the hardest niches to get somebody's attention. But anybody that's listening to this right now, whatever your niche is, if you overlay taxes or tax issues on top of that, that becomes a pain point that people will now listen to you and they'll give you an opportunity to engage. That's been my one secret sauce, Kristen, to like get things to move quicker. Talk about taxes, people don't like them.
Yeah, I think another, if you're willing to put in the time and the money, writing a book is a great way to market because it automatically makes you an expert in whatever it is you're talking about, and it's easy. People are going to accept a book from you, and so I've seen people just like the client I had that worked with firefighters. They would just drop boxes of books off at the different firehouses. I have another client who just sends them out to all the tech professionals that he comes in contact with on LinkedIn. And so that can be a really good one. In fact, I'll be honest, the reason I wrote a book is because I saw how successful it was for my clients that were writing books. I said, takes a while, it took 18 months to get it to market, but it's been great. It's a great opening. And the other one I really like is podcasts. Because you can, and what you're doing, right? Like you invite people in that niche community to come and talk to you. And then from there, they'll promote what you're doing to their network. You're establishing this great relationship with them. And so I think podcasts and books are probably like the two best ways I would see to market right now to make real impact.
I love it. I love it. So as we sit here and we think about niching, what challenges do you think advisors are going to face when they think about niching in today's world?
Most of it is mental. One of it is just, what if this is the wrong niche and I put all this effort into it and I don't get anywhere? Another one is I'm going to alienate my existing clients, or I'm going to turn away business. And that really doesn't have to be the case. Like you can do this in a way where people who are not in your niche don't necessarily know that you're marketing to this niche, right? Like your clients aren't going to your website on a daily basis and analyzing what you're saying. So you could leave your homepage the same and then just have a page for your niche and start there. So you're not alienating anybody. As far as if it's the wrong niche or not, there in my book, I talk about the process, and there are points where you can kind of evaluate if this is going to be good for you. And one of them is just to interview people in your niche and see if this is something that they'd be interested in and that it resonates with them. And you should do that fairly quickly, because if this is not going to resonate, you can pivot to something else. And I don't really, unless you pick the wrong niche, you're not going to fail because you have focus and you're going to be consistent. And that's way better than whatever it is you're doing right now, which is just throwing things at the wall and seeing what's going to stick. So it's really hard to fail, I think, at a niche if you really put in all the efforts that's required. And if you chose a good niche, that's the other piece.
So what I heard is no spaghetti marketing.
No spaghetti marketing.
No
Yeah.
spaghetti market. Okay, guys, please, no spaghetti marketing. No, just throw it and see what sticks.
No scatter. What is it? Scattershot marketing.
Yeah, just to throw it to see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But there was you dropped a nugget in there that I want to make sure I reemphasize, which is in the technology world and business world, we would call it product market fit. And
Mm-hmm.
so going out and actually talking to the community that you want to serve is paramount, right? Especially if you're not gonna trying to sell them anything, and all you're looking to do is get information. Like, you can literally ask them about their problems, ask them about their issues, ask them about frustrations they have, etc. Right? You build this relationship, and now you have research. Now you see, is there enough people out there with enough set of issues? And here's one of the questions that I think advisors don't consider while they gather this information is, okay, now that you've gotten an understanding of what the issues and pain points of your niche are, are you going to enjoy serving that? Okay. I know advisors who now have been in the business 10, 15, 20 years, and they picked a niche a long time ago. And you know what? They're miserable. They don't love it. They don't love it anymore. They're not happy with the niche, or they got into the niche and they went so well, but they don't enjoy serving the folks. So think about advisors as you're listening to is pick a niche that, Kristen laid this out, that you have some connection to, that can afford to pay you, that you can properly figure out how to market to, and where they live at, and where you're going to figure out where they're playing at, so that you can market them effectively. And then pick a niche once you understand them deeply that you're going to enjoy serving, because hopefully you're going to have a relationship with them for a long time.
Absolutely. That was a great summary.
So you broke down the one key issue, which summed up to this. Most of the issues advisors are going to have as they face going forward are between the 6 inches between their 2 ears. It's going to be
right.
mental, right? They're going to deal with mental barriers as it comes to their marketing.
Yep.
What encouraging point would you leave advisors with regards to niche marketing and what it can do for them?
So everyone who has done it becomes just a 100% believer in it and wishes that they had done it before. And so if you can just believe that everyone who's done it is being truthful, just know that that's going to work for you as well. And it's going to take some work, but 3 years is going to pass one way or the other. So you might as well get started now and be in a better position 3 years from now, where marketing just becomes easier for you. Then 3 years from now, you're still just doing spaghetti marketing. I love that term.
Listen, no spaghetti marketing. Here's the thing, guys, that all of you that are listening, there's a reason why your favorite restaurants, that your fast food chains that you go to, are so efficient, whether that's Chick-fil-A or In-N-Out, like Kristen referenced, because she's in California, and that's what they do there is go to In-N-Out. But there's a reason why they're so efficient, because they have a process. And one of the things that niching does is it allows you to constantly serve people with similar issues, which makes you way more operationally efficient for you and your team, which makes you way more profitable, which makes it way less costly potentially for you to market to these folks, because you're not practicing spaghetti marketing.
All right.
So I really, really, really appreciate, you joining us, Kristen, and sharing your insights and how advisors can become uncomparable. Those of you that are listening, please make sure that you like this, you share this with somebody that you know, rewatch it, and make sure that you go to Amazon and get Kristen's book, Uncomparable. It is the best advisor book that I've read in 10 plus years. A phenomenal read. You can literally, I time myself, you can literally read this book in 4 to 4.5 hours. If you're a quick reader, if you're a slow reader, could take you 6. Totally easy read, lots of points. Please bring a highlighter and a pencil so that you can make some notes in the margins. There's some great points and frameworks there. And comment on this post as well. We're going to be giving away 10 signed copies of Kristen's book. You want that, believe me, it is really, really, really good. So, Kristen Luke, thank you so much for joining us on the Damn Live podcast. And everybody out there listening, we hope to see you again. And let's do the damn thing together.